Some people might be wondering, what right do you and I have to talk to them about scaling their practice?
Is general practice in Australia under attack? There are a few people who think so. Welcome to the podcast by Scale My Clinic, founded by Doctors Todd Cameron and Sachin Patel, who are on a mission to help every general practice owner achieve his or her dream. The Scale My Clinic podcast is designed to leave listeners with insights and understanding gained by real lived experience that will help general practice owners create impact, get their time back, and enjoy increased revenue. Join Todd and Sachin every week as they share their stories on the Scale My Clinic podcast.
You and I have both worked with practice owners for quite some time, aside from the fact that we have been and continue to be practice owners. I'd really love to hear from you just all about the pathway, how you arrived here, and let's not go all the way back to conception, but maybe back to childhood, what it was that influenced you in becoming, an expert in business.
Yeah, cheers, Todd. So, some of you will have heard this. Todd, you'll have heard me explain this. My business journey started at probably age of 5, 4, something like that. My parents had a drugstore, but not not
illicit,
not the drugs that not the reefer. I'm talking about non-pharmaceutical medicines, and had that. And then when I was 7, we moved to a newsagent for 2 years, which we were there for 30, but that's another story as well. And in the newsagent, probably from the age of 11, I was active, like I was working and helping. My parents worked every day of the year apart from Christmas Day. And so I think when you're in that environment, you don't get that much time away from the business. So our family time was in the business. So, wanted to chat to mum or dad, it would be behind the counter in the shop. And from the age of 11, I developed a knack for marketing. I was selling cigarettes and alcohol and creating my market. So 14 years later, or whenever I qualified, I was able to have a whole group of people to tell the importance of stopping smoking and stopping drinking or reducing drinking. So
vertically integrated marketplace, I think we call that such.
Best way, right? And so that was the journey. And really being part of a community like that lent itself well to my particular choice of what I did as a doctor. And then along the way at university, I always loved business from before, just from being in that environment. And at university, we had the opportunity to do what's called an intercalated degree. And so in my situation, I chose management at Imperial College in London. And it was really cool. We got to do, it's a bit like a mini MBA. So
right.
The big girls and boys were doing the MBA, and us undergrads were doing this management degree. But it was based loosely on the MBA. So same topics, same type of group work and assignments. And so that really opened my eyes from a theoretical point of view to business. But so that was always there. And then, when fast forward years later, I was in Australia, and then I had to make a choice about whether I stayed or went back to the UK. And for me, the big thing in business was just about creating a culture I could be really proud of. And the place I was working, whilst okay, wasn't an outstanding culture. And I decided if I stayed in Australia, I would want to start something that was built with my vision of culture and community impact in mind, because I just felt that would be far more fulfilling. And so subsequently, the plan was 12 to 18 months before opening, and 3-4 months later we were open. Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. With us, opportunity came and slapped us in the face, and it was me and a business partner. And then over the next 4 or 5 years, we worked in 4 years probably, we worked incredibly hard. We built it to 25 plus GPs across 2 sites, all manner of allied health, non-GP specialists, a team of above 60. And then had a life event where, my cousin died. It just made me examine where things were. And whilst we had, on the face of it, external, the world outside looked at us and thought, wow, they're doing great. And we were doing okay. The reality is I was working incredibly hard. I wasn't happy with everything in my business, far from it, especially around some of the HR side of things. There were just some, really painful things there. And, somewhere along the line had contemplated running away from it almost, just selling up and stopping because it just felt too hard. I had hair then. But when my cousin died, it was a chance conversation. I remember the moment. It was a chance conversation with another cousin of my cousins, and he introduced me to the concept of business coaching that he'd been having. And when I got back, and after my cousin had died and we'd laid him to rest, then had an honest conversation when I got back with my business partner, which was, look, we've worked really hard, but there's stuff that we need to upgrade ourselves on and our business on. It's just not right where we're at right now. And so went on a business coaching journey with Nick the coach. If you Google him, you'll find him. I think my testimonials on his website. And that really, really opened our eyes. And subsequently over the next, 2-3 years, really completely changed the part we played in the business, and I personally played. Was much clearer about the decisions I had to make. Went from 20%, 25% of revenue, me and my business partner, down to less than 3%. The business still grew 40-50% in that time. And then as that happened, and I spent more focus on the people, then other practices started asking, can you help us? Can you give us advice? And so started to help people. And really on a personal journey of upgrading. So business is just a reflection of us as an individual. I'd been upgrading significantly, I think, as an individual during that time. And I realized that's where I wanted to spend my time, really helping others go through a similar transformation that I felt I'd done. And I'll just be clear, that was 5-6 years ago, 7 years ago. The level I think I'm at now is like on another level to when I was then. So it's a continual process of upgrading. And so, my business partner and I made the decision to exit out of that business. I still have other medical business interests, which are, 40 plus GPs, etc. That is a mobile business. But in this coaching space, I started coaching one-on-one. And then realized, and I worked with all sorts of medical professionals, only medical professionals who owned businesses or wanted to improve themselves in their business, whether they're sole traders or business owners. And there was just a pattern there, Todd. And then you and I had loads of conversations, and we both saw the same patterns, right? And so from that is where Scale My Clinic was born. And then maybe another episode would be the types of things we've done together in Scale My Clinic. But that's the journey up until Scale My Clinic.
Cool. I have one statement and one question. So my statement is, you and I have a common thread in clinic ownership, because we were negotiating to take the Lorimar Clinic. When I say take, to lease the Lorimar Clinic, and at that point in time, I determined that it was probably one thing too many for us to be doing. We were expanding at a fairly substantial rate, and so you ended up being in a place where, had I have said yes, you and I may not be talking today, which is a great happenstance. I think that things went that way. The second thing I wanted to just ask you a question about is, when you undertook coaching, when you said yes to Nick the coach, tell me a bit about what that was like and how that influenced how Scale My Clinic is.
Yeah. So the way it worked was. I remember we went for our first session. It was a complimentary first session. It was physical, so it was about half an hour away, 20 minutes to half an hour, probably about half an hour. So we had to physically go myself and Sati, my old business partner, we go sometimes together, sometimes separately, drive to this other suburb, see Nick, and the deal was, I remember it was the best part of $4,000 a month, with a minimum 3-month commitment or something like that, or maybe it was 12. I can't remember for now. And then it was every week. So you'd turn up, we'd cover a topic, make an action plan, go, and then before the next week, we'd come back with our action plan. Maybe we'd send it in, and then we'd turn up and then say, this is what we've done, this is what we've struggled with, this is what we need to do next. That was the flow. And then he'd give us some content or teach us on the day some concept. And it was really helpful because it helped us make some really useful decisions. But the part I struggled with, so I would definitely do it again, but the part I struggled with most was that it was like a different language to the business I ran. It didn't feel immediately translatable, right, and applicable to our business. And so there was quite a lot of work of learning the lingo and translating it to its relevance in general practice.
Yeah. Like, what does a sales funnel mean in general practice, or those kind of things that, as you say, standard business principles aren't immediately translatable into health, but they certainly can be transformed into the right context, can't they?
Absolutely. And then the other thing that I struggled with is you don't know what you don't know. And so we talk about this all the time, but there was no community to calibrate it. Like, I didn't know, these are the deals that I've got, these are the agreements I have, these are the numbers we're hitting. Where does that sit? It was like there was no comparison. There was no ability to, not that I'm comparing to try and beat someone. It's really just to understand where it sits in the grand scheme of things, and understanding what's possible. So I think the biggest difficulty is knowing what's possible. So
I reckon I would liken this to, you're a tennis player, but all you're allowed to do is hit the tennis ball against the ball, against the wall in your backyard. And so you just never get to know what's that player metaphorically on the other side of the net like. How good am I? What do I need to do to improve? Where's my game weak? You just never find out all those things, do you? That's the challenge.
No, and it's the Roger Bannister thing, right? So so many years people have tried to break the 4-minute mile. And then once Roger Bannister broke it, then the records just kept tumbling after that, because suddenly it was possible. But until you know what that possibility is, nothing else is really, the boundaries of what can be achieved are not defined until you have a yardstick as to where those boundaries are near, or what could even go beyond those boundaries.
Yeah, it's a fascinating part of coaching, isn't it? Because people often ask, and doctors, I'm going to say, we're both doctors, so we can say this, we're the worst for this. One of the problems with being a doctor is, on a raw measurement, there's a reasonable chance you'll be the smartest person in the room, based on IQ, but that has nothing to do with business success. But people often correlate the two. And I kind of look at this like, sometimes you might talk to a classroom teacher, and because they're typically the smartest person in that room, sometimes that translates out into the wider world, and you start to believe that you're the smartest person outside of a confined space. And medicine's the same. I think that doctors often need to get out of their way, realize that there is genius hidden within them that is completely unsighted from them. If you didn't need coaching, then anybody who's in the top 10 or above in world sport would never need a coach. Because if you're number one, by definition, there's no one in the world better than you. But the number one in every sport doesn't usually have one coach. They usually have 3, 4, 5 maybe more coaches. They'll have them for different areas in their life. They'll have a mindset coach. They'll have, somebody who's a skills coach. They'll have a conditioning coach. They'll usually have somebody coaching their diet. You name it. They'll have a swathe of coaches, because they know that it is completely accepted in high performance environments that you have somebody to see the things that you can't see. That's the Johari window. Doctors are shocking for this. I know everything. You're like, well, if you do know everything, then that's a problem. And if you're doing everything, which is the other thing, that is a massive problem. You're never going to grow if you're like that. Common things that we see. One of the things that is pretty cool about Scale My Clinic, and this is not about advertising or promoting that. It's about promoting the growth of privately held clinics Australia wide, indeed globally. Is that it's distributed. You don't have to leave home to get it, right? It's all locked down, recorded. The world we live in now, the accessibility of content and community is extraordinary. And you and I have talked about this, but coaching practice owners, clinic owners, Australia wide, every state, every territory, literally in all of the corners, is pretty cool, because if you had to bring all those people together, then it would just be an enormous commitment of time, energy, and money from everybody to get there. And to be frank, they'd be knackered by the time they got there in many cases.
100%. So I think you and I sat down and calculated this once. So the bits I love are about how the coaching was then and is now. Is that now everything's recorded and stored on a website. I can log in at any time. If my kid's up at night with a fever and I can't get back to sleep and I want to just absorb something, I can log in and do that. It's doable. I can do it any time.
Yeah.
Before, the only time the content was there was when I was in front of the coach. It wasn't recorded. There was nothing else aside from that. And the time, physically going somewhere every week, 2 partners every week, having to get in a vehicle, leave the business, leave the clinic, leave on time, which is hard enough for doctor owners. So you're talking altogether probably 2 hours combined of owner's time in addition to the time of the coaching. So that 2 hours, if an owner's time is worth $500 an hour, then that's $1,000 a week, so $52,000 in time.
Yeah.
Right. Plus the best part of 50,000 for the actual coaching. So that's $100,000 a year. Now it's available, a percentage of that without the need to move. So you can be wherever you are in the country. That freedom that affords really leaves no excuse for any business owner. In our case, we talk about clinic owners, but any business owner should be able to get the help they need, should have access to it with the opportunities and the technology at our fingertips.
I think the other thing too, you and I know this from coaching, large numbers of owners over the years, but there is always a recalibration. So you mentioned it earlier, right? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Famous Mike Tyson quote. This is true in everything that we teach. So without being able to come back and calibrate, say, hey, I proceeded down that path and I had this type of barrier or obstacle I had to overcome. I didn't foresee it. How can I approach this? Now, if you're in a community of people who have done the same thing, say, hey, you know what? I had that too. I did A, B, and C, and that seemed to work for me. Try that in your environment. Makes a massive difference, because otherwise what happens is you get stuck. You've got to wait till next week, go back. You got your 1 hour slot and you've only got one brain. And so, one of our favorite sayings is none of us is smarter than all of us. It's better to have a lot of minds at work and helping out on the issue. So massive difference in upgrade with group coaching versus one-to-one, to my mind anyway.
Oh, 100%. Even, I used to do one-to-one coaching and we have members in Project X who were with either of us when we've helped one. And I think universally, the response is, this is so much better. Now, I don't know if that's talking about each of us.
Let's not explore that.
But the reality is, it's just the fact that everything's laid down. Repetition is the mother of skill. Sometimes you might take something in 4, 5, 6 times and take different nuggets of gold from it. And so having that ability is so useful.
Absolutely, like reading a book multiple times or seeing a movie, you'll see something different each time. I might just fill in a little bit of time with my story, if I may. And so my journey to medicine started with being a patient. Actually, as a kid, I was pretty crook, as they say in Australia, and had brittle asthma, which was the kind of the term at the time. All that meant was I was sick all the time, and treatment was pretty shitty back then. Ventolin and homeopathic doses of Becotide, Intel, a bit of Newland Theatre, all of these ancient things that are no longer used. And so I ended up in hospital a lot of my youth, basically. And being in hospital a lot, I was in there enough that I was the patient often in exams for the pediatric physician exams. And so I got to meet all these young and aspiring doctors. And I'm going to be honest, I thought, this doesn't look that hard. I reckon I can do it. So that was my motivation. Nobody has done anything remotely medical in my family as far back as I know. So, and then my ambition was to become a pediatric respiratory physician, which is, the doctors that I met as a youngster in hospital all the time. And I did 1 year of physician training and thought, my God, this is shocking. All of the elements of excellence do not exist in a hospital. So, if you want to get high performing teams, you need to be able to choose your team. You need to have detailed onboarding. You need to have accountability. You need to have dashboards, scoreboards of some description, a meeting cadence that makes sense, a habit of excellence and everything. But none of these things. It was literally, see one, do one, teach one. And I just thought, this will drive me spare if I have to stick around here. So I left, came to the UK for a year, and then came back and did general practice. And general practice, to me, was something that I had done when I graduated from medicine. So I'd sort of done it on the side, as it were. My belief was all of the really cool patients were in the community where you could make a difference. By the time they got to the hospital, the opportunity had been missed. And so I also had a passion of building a business. As a kid, I grew up in a household with my dad as an insurance agent. And he was a member of something called the $1 Million Round Table, which I think you'll find still exists as a group coaching for salespeople in insurance. He'd have books by Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, all these guys from the 80s that were really big. Anyway, unfortunately, he died at age 42 when I was 14. And that further kind of cemented, or maybe sowed the seed for my passion for general practice, because I figured, hey, we need to keep people like this alive for longer, and that can probably only be done in general practice. Not probably, can only be done in privately held clinics. Not going to be done in a hospital, because by the time you end up there, probably too late. And so, then began my journey in general practice. And I had 5 years between graduating and owning my first clinic. And I didn't initially set out on a journey to own multiple clinics, but I did on the basis of I thought that if you did something well, in order to get better, you needed to do more of it, was my fundamental belief. And all of that business book reading and listening to cassette tapes and, watching DVDs, all that kind of stuff had obviously, had some kind of an impact. But I thought, okay, I just need to do more of this. And so I ended up owning in partnership. So I've always had 2 business partners, an accountant for the longest time, and then an investment banker for a period of time as well, in all of the clinics that I've owned. And I think I've opened, I wasn't quite sure of the numbers because some were opened and moved, and it's like 11 or 12 clinics that were started. Then at a point in time, 2015, we were having some conversations with some experts that were wanting to publicly list list health company. And the two businesses that were kind of the kernel, the seed for that ASX entity, were the two biggest clinics in the group that was then called Modern Medical. And so that's exactly what happened. There were two clinics that went in. As a part of that transaction, I became a director of that company, publicly listed company, so an ASX company. And then for the next 2 years, we grew that business to 9 or 10 GP clinics. It was around about 60 allied health businesses Australia-wide, some home care, some mobile services into aged care. And by the time it was taken private in 2018, the business had revenues of $175 million. So, small to medium enterprise by ASX listed, size kind of rules, if you like, but a ton of learning on my side. And so, as with you, Sachin, I'd help people out over the years just because my passion is about having sustainable, privately held clinics in Australia, and I just want to see that those people have every advantage. We are them, so we understandably care about their well-being, but on a really broad and obvious level, the foundation of Australian employment is small business. They employ the vast majority of people, and we don't have available to us the tactics of huge businesses where they can, just shift the money to wherever it suits them. We know all the usual culprits that are paying 1% and 2% tax. The reality is that it's the bunnies like us that are the backbone of taxation and employment in Australia. No two words about it. And then in general practice or in privately held clinics, the other benefit is if it's GP, 84% of Australians see a GP in any 1 year. Now, that is a really, really cool thing. And I always used to say general practice was the bread and the milk at the back of the supermarket, not in a disrespectful way, but it's the reason you always need to go and do something. And that was my connection to that passion, just knowing that if we had sustainable businesses, they're more likely to treat their people well, employed staff as well as GPs, they're more likely to offer really good quality medicine to their communities. And then we just saw that, both of us saw that as a multiplier of a way of helping more people. And let's be really frank, how many people are out there trying to screw general practice? I mean, geez, there's one villain, which is the federal government, that just do everything to screw general practice, mostly because, we don't do much, like we sook a bit and then we just take it, like we're the masters of tolerating crappy circumstances. And it's like rope-a-dope, you're like Muhammad Ali up against the rope with Foreman just laying into you, MBS freeze, pathology, big pathology, lease crap, and, you name it, MBS audits and PSR, like just the blows come at you left, right and center. It's a really, really tough job, and to be honest with you, you know this, but they've done such a good job of screwing general practice that nobody wants to do it. That's how bad they've done it, right? Graduates don't want to do it. Was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago, where the number of this stunned me. The number of doctors that have their primary qualification in medicine in a country other than Australia is now more than half of all GPs in Australia. That is extraordinary, and it says that our federal government has massively mismanaged our workforce needs if we're having to steal doctors from globally, and we're a developed country. We're stealing doctors from everywhere, and people graduating from medicine are really falling away from it. It used to be more than half of all graduates wanted to do general practice. I'm not sure of the exact number now, but I think it's more like 1/4, all of which bodes very, very ill for primary care in any country if people just don't want to do the most important job. Let me be really blunt here. The most important job in any healthcare system is the biggest base of care. If you get the foundation layer wrong, the rest is no good. And so then 2018, my shares were compulsorily acquired, as were everybody else's, but managing a buyout which was from insiders. So members of the board had launched the buyout. Was a really interesting experience. During my time there, had a look under the hood of a ton of general practices and other businesses, allied health, all of those other businesses that we looked at. We obviously did due diligence on, but I would pay particular attention to the privately held clinics. fascinating. And as you and I have discussed, you saw the same things again and again and again. We were joking about this earlier, but running a medical practice of any sort is like running an event that happens to be called a wedding. There's a special price for everything, right? And the premium is just determined by the person who's selling it. And so we just see people getting taken to the cleaners all the time. Comes from the price they buy the practice at and being misled on that, poorly advised, to the services that they buy. I mean, we see this again and again. Somebody who is flat out with patients and is still paying a marketing business a couple of grand a month for marketing for what? You can't see the patients. What's the point? But we see this stuff all the time, right? be it accountants overcharging, or there's a lot of stuff that people are taken advantage of. And you look at a lot of the emergency calls that you and I get, and used to get with coaching. I don't do any gratis coaching now, other than people that I choose through certain programs. But we're pretty strict about this. The people we coach are those in Project X, and that's it. You can't buy our time. I don't sell time by the hour, or I don't go and work for anybody else. We work together for this objective only. A lot of the time we get these emergency calls, right? Somebody wants to do this to me. And the most recent one I had was a combination of two professionals that wanted to charge somebody $20,000 to sort out a problem that wasn't a problem. This happens repeatedly. I won't mention the names because this will be around for a long time. But yeah, this emergency message saying, "Hey, listen, help me out. I'm about to be screwed by these people. Do I need to take it?" So we're really passionate about making sure that doesn't happen to people. And I still own practices as you own your business, which is a mobile service in itself. So you don't have to pay bricks and mortar rent, which is nice. That's probably enough, unless you had anything further that you wanted to add, Sachin.
Yeah, one comment and one question.
Okay.
Just to match you. So thanks for sharing that. The comment is this, which is I think about the people that we surround ourselves with, and Todd, we'll do an episode about this, but we in medicine are tolerance machines. So we're pretty well trained at putting up with really crappy situations. And so we can get accustomed to poor advice or advice that doesn't upgrade, and we just work ourselves harder to mitigate for the advice. And I think one thing I like that Todd talks about quite a lot, Todd, is about the importance of taking second and third opinions. I think that's really useful in whenever you're not sure about your advisory position. Even if you are sure about what your advisors are saying to you, there's no harm. It's probably the best investment you'll make. My question, Todd, is you have looked under the hood of a lot of practices, both through the work we do together, but before that through your own work and through your time looking at potential acquisitions. There was one thing that stuck out to you as something that you saw repeatedly and you just wish you could help fix. What would that be? That's a great question. And because I was looking at mostly buy-side transactions, probably the single biggest issue is that the owners are still an integral part of the practice. So literally they were selling themselves. They didn't realize that, of course. It didn't appear like that to them, but that's probably the fact that they never worked themselves out of their business. The other thing I noticed is that most people sell too late. So in most cases, the glory years were probably between 5 and 10 years prior, that they ran out of their own ideas and motivation to continue to grow the practice. And so the practice is kind of dying and needed remedial work in many cases. So, it was all centered around just that kind of sense of self-awareness that people often lack as owners. They just surround themselves with people who agree with them. And so nothing much changes over time is probably the main thing. And I think that if those people had been self-aware and had received coaching, I reckon in most cases they'd probably get 50 to 100% more
for their enterprise, and they probably would have been able to exit a lot earlier. So, I often reflect on the value that could have been extracted that they never did.
Yeah, very, very, very important words. Maybe want to re-listen to that last couple of minutes, I think. Cool. Well, I think that can bring us, this will be our longest episode that we will do, just to introduce ourselves and help the scalers understand who we are and where we come from in life. Todd, I'll let you finish off in the customary way.
Awesome. The key thing here is make sure that you take something away from it. So the first thing is reflect on what's been most valuable for you in today's episode. And the second thing to think about is, once you understand what's most valuable, what is your one single action that you will undertake as a result of listening today? Make sure that you subscribe and like this, share it with somebody that you know it will add value to, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning into the Scale My Clinic podcast with Todd and Sachin and the team. For more information and to get the resources mentioned in this podcast, visit www.scalemyclinic.com.